So today is this month is National Suicide Prevention Month, and I feel like I wanted to address on here from my personal experience because of something that happened for me. Today, I just got off the phone with my doctor, my medical doctor, who is not my physician and not my therapist. He is he is responsible for my medication. And today it has been 2 months that I have no longer, and I have officially, I've sort of weaned off for 2 months, but I have now taken the official initiative for this month and today to no longer be prescribed under antidepressants. Now that is a huge thing for me, and for those out there who are not aware about that, I want to tell you the story of why this is important for me, because if you don't understand or if you never experienced it, you probably won't. Ever since I was 19, I have been diagnosed. I have found out that I have been diagnosed with chronic depression, I believe it's called. Along with the fact, many of you know, I have social anxiety. I also have autism. So all of this trails like a snowball effect, if you will. One leads to another, like a domino effect. If my anxiety is triggered and something happens, it triggers my depression. If my depression triggers, 78 years ago was the first time that I was on antidepressants, because within those 7, 8 years ago, I self-admitted myself to a clinic because I had tried to self-inflict myself. It was a hard situation for me, very hard. I was I was in the clinic for about a week and a half at least. And while that week and a half may not be much for some people, because it might be to some people a lot longer, but it was very eye-opening for me because I had never taken the reins of this much of it. There have been many moments I have small self-inflict myself. For example, something simple as a push pin needle I would poke myself with. I would poke myself on the wrist. I would take safety pins and pierce myself all over my body as a way of a stress reliever, if you will. Something as simple as even this, my pin cushion for my sewing needles. I would use that as a way to inflict pain on myself, to deal with my depression and my anxiety. The first time, but it wasn't the first time that I had admitted. The first time I was admitted I was 17, 18. My parents were worried for me. In a big house in Swanton, my parents were worried for me. My dad was at work, my mom was at home, and she was worried about me. My dad tried to talk me out of some things of my mental health, of my depression, because I was dealing with a bad heartbreak. And at one point, my parents were worried because I had just decided to down myself pills. And that was that moment they told me that you need to talk to somebody. So I ended up going to my local clinic, and I had stayed overnight until they could actually clear me to be released. Fast forward years later, like I said, 7 years ago, I had dealt with a conflict with my mother where it got to the point where my mother was aggravated because of the divorce, and unfortunately, my appearance, I resemble a lot of my father, and I know many of my family is going to see this, but I want them to understand, when you tell me that I look like my father, it's not a compliment. It's not a compliment. My father, for years, was not the good man that you all claim him to be. And this part is only for my family, because my family doesn't understand the fact that I have dealt with that traumatic situation. My father isn't a demon. My father isn't an abusive, physical person. He's not. He is a manipulator. And I had to learn as I got older that he was that way. And the worst part is he was mostly that way to me because I had, being the oldest and the only child and the eldest child, I had a standard that I had to follow from him. It was from him that I had to be the necessary stat quo so everyone else could follow suit. In a way, it sounded like grooming without the whole grooming situation, but in a manipulative way, it kind of felt like it. And that traumatic situation that I had to deal with for years took a toll on me mentally, to the point where it came to the point he and I did not see along. The last moments of my life that I knew he had any involvement of my life was back in 2004, 2005, when I got to work for Disney as a cast member. It was at that moment he was only proud of me that. But when nothing came out of that would elevate to my college experiences, he didn't see anything else in me. So when the divorce happened, it was easy for me to be phased out from him, because we had seen each other as just, at one point, we tried to rekindle ourselves twice. One time, I was in the library, at my local library downtown, and he ran into me. We took a picture together. The picture you probably have seen all the time. The second time was, I think, 3 years ago. Since living here, he came into town. And he didn't see that stuff of it. And it wasn't until within that same year, it slowly started coming to the point he just decided to not do anything. He tried to make amends in a way, but he did it in a way that made it more of the fact of he wanted to value my success. My photography career, me being who I am, expressive who I am, is now he wants to use it as a shiny new metal piece on him, when he never showed how much he was a value in the sense of it. To this day, he still follows my photography since TikTok. But along with that situation, it took a toll on my mother. And I've been Obama's boy since that moment, because my mother was the one who opened the gates to let me be expressive, to let me be myself. When I wanted my tattoos, when I wanted my piercings, she said fine. When I wanted to get into photography, she said fine. My father was the one to say, you want it, you got to grab it like a brass ring. But unfortunately, there was moments where traumatically for her, it was so much dealing with him and the hurt that she dealt with. Being in a marriage with a man who has been in the marriage with her as long as I was existent, it was hard for her to overdeal with that. And when it comes to someone who has the face of your former 30-year marriage, it's hard to try to break that into her. So it was to a point we started having conflict. And then one day, after going home from church, she and I got into a conflict to a point where she was feeling she was being negligent to me. And I, at the moment, was so much in an anxiety moment, I just felt like I wanted to end it. She then decided at that last moment that, I decided that last moment that I needed to see somebody, or I needed to go somewhere somebody would watch me. From that moment on, for the last 8 years, I have been on antidepressants. And it was at that moment I said to myself, I never want to deal with this again. So I have worked my ass off within the 8 years to get where I am now. Whereas now I look at it as this, and I told this to my doctor as well. I see the value in life now to the point where I tell myself I'm more afraid of the afterlife when my life is expired, and less on trying to take my life and what is exacting of me. And I want everyone out there to understand this is a situation. You can overcome this. If you ever felt like you wanted to, don't. Because you'll realize as you get older, there is more value in that than you think. So take this as something, as a way, in my example, as a way for you to grow from a situation like me when it comes to dealing with suicide prevention. I hope this is something you can take into account and to learn from, especially to younger viewers out there, when it comes to a message of somebody who can overcome something as this. And just know, there's no shame to ask for help, whether it's by a hotline, by a stranger, or by someone who you closely know. If you need the help, ask them. Don't be afraid to ask. There's nothing prideless or shameful for it.